One of them is coming from the source. In other words, sort of like the primordial thing that things come out of. And the other one is coming from within us as individuals. As in, I am an individual. I decide. And you really do decide. You may not know you really do decide. And you may not understand you decide because, sometimes the influences are overwhelming and you go in directions that you wouldn't normally go in because of the influences. Like, let's say the government's going to take your house away if you don't pay your taxes. Well, you're going to pay your taxes. No matter how wrong it is, you're going to do it anyway because the influence is too great. The power is too great to fight against. Or, you're 5 years old and your mommy's going to give you a spanking, even though you want to act the fool and you want to do and you want to control. The power's too great. So you have to bring yourself into discipline. And what is that? That is the higher self. Well, the war that rages is playing on the self, on the human self. The tandem of the human experience, the higher self and the lower self. But I mean, why? Why is all this happening? Why? What is so powerful about the tandem existence of humans? What is so powerful? Well, lots of things. But one thing that we can look at and really simply, quickly, very fast understand is that consciousness, which creates our cities and makes our cars and formulates our ice creams and our medicines and puts our governments together and decides, okay, are we going to have a tyrant for a ruler, or are we even going to have a ruler? How do we see God? Is God some guy sitting in a throne, or is God some, Middle Eastern version, or, do we need to chop off your hand because you stole something, or do we need to be kind and cool? Do we govern ourselves by the Bible? Do we govern ourselves by Darwinism? I mean, all of this is consciousness, and consciousness creates the kind of society. See, this is the thing you need to understand about being human as opposed to being some kind of glorified animal, which the society is, or the bad rulers of society are trying to get people brainwashed into believing, and they're very successful at it, quite frankly. You need to understand we are not glorified animals. We're just not. We have a dualistic being, and no other animal does. That's not part of the animal kingdom. That's part of the human experience, not the animal kingdom. Never will be, never has been. No matter what the people in authority that want to bend the mind of the youth, which some of these youths are now 50, 60 years old, are trying to get you to think. But the consciousness, the consciousness is what invents things, what creates things, what puts systems in place. It's like the difference between the Soviet Union, and it's no longer here, so I'm going to talk about it, and the original founding and forging of the United States, which is pretty much on its way to being no longer here. If we don't wake up, and I'm going to talk about that too, and that's part of the history we need to look at. I'm going to go further into that after we get through the whole arrangement thing. But it's like both of these things were part of the consciousness, you see. So if you are in the war between darkness and light, between light and darkness, you would understand these things very, very, very clearly. Fortunately for humans, they're not really aware of the of the intricacies of the war that's going on. They're supposed to know. We're all supposed to know that the war is going on, and we're all supposed to be clued into, hey, we want to take the side of the light because this is a far better outcome, and the physics of the light make for a far better existence with way more individuality and way more sovereign power from the individual human. And even though we don't, we're supposed to. I mean, it's set up this way. But when you bend the consciousness, you could bend it in any direction you want. I mean, look at the forging and founding of the United States. That's the consciousness leaning in one direction, as opposed to the Soviet Union. That's the consciousness leaning in another direction. Now, from any perception, living inside the confines of those two paradigms, which is really what they are because that's what consciousness creates, everyone living in those two paradigms would have to say, hey, the forging and founding of the United States was a much better deal than the forging and founding of the Soviet Union under Stalin. Anybody and everybody in their right mind knows this. Historians know it. And I'm not going to go any further with that, but I want you to understand that war that rages has to do in part, and in a big part, with getting you to think certain things, because the thinking of certain things brings about the consciousness in certain directions, and the consciousness acting on environment creates paradigm. So in essence, the war between light and darkness is about creating either this paradigm or that paradigm.